why make a program in a programming language when you could do it in a spreadsheet? Well, the answer to that is that it's terrible for programming. If you ever tried to use VBA, you're an insane person, I'll be honest. But today, we're gonna watch someone make Flappy Bird in Excel. I'm skeptical, but let's see if he can do it.
Microsoft Excel. When you hear those words, you probably think of a spreadsheet program that most people use for normal things like financial analysis, inventory management, and record keeping. But what if I told you that it was completely possible to make a game entirely within Excel? Turns out there's this thing called Visual Basic for applications.
I just mentioned it. VBA, terrible. It's terrible. But technically, it's close to like Visual Basic. That's where the VB comes in. So maybe you could make a game in it. I just would never put myself through that amount of frustration and pain.
Or VBA, integrated within Excel, which allows you to program from within it. Most normal people would use this for utilizing macros to automate things like copying and pasting, formatting data, or creating charts.
Or most normal people would just not ever use it because we're not masochists.
But I'm not normal, so I decided to push it to its limit and attempt to create a game within it.
Don't think we missed it. Don't think we missed it. I see you.
It to its limit and attempt to create a game within it. Specifically Flappy Bird, as in my opinion, it is the sort of titular benchmark game whenever you learn a new engine, or in this case, Office application. So, without any further delay, let's get right into how this was.
Not only do we have the regular old asset borrowing, we also got some nice Mario going on here and here.
Or in this case, Office application. So, without any further delay, let's get right into how this was even possible in the first place, by discussing...
One thing that Excel is not good at is getting you to press the subscribe button. That's something that you're going to have to do yourself. Subscribe.
The main way we could program methods in VBA is by declaring a sub, which in this case stands for subroutine. Within
So basically a function, but we're stuck back in like 1980.
In these subroutines, we could pretty much do anything we feel like within Excel's limitations. So, for the first build, here's what I created. Basically, I was able to create and set a range for the bird and floor, and simply color them accordingly. Then, I created a simple do-until loop that clears the previous cell, offsets the bird cell by 1, and colors it in once again, until it reaches the ground.
Okay, that makes sense.
Here's what it looks like in action. Right now, it does not really look like a game, but trust me, even seeing a bit of animation, if you could even call it that, with an
I mean, he says it doesn't look much like a game, but that right there, I mean, what else could it be?
Call it that, within Excel is quite cool. Moving on, the second build of the game expanded a tiny bit on the first one. For this, I went ahead and added gravity and tested a bouncing movement. VBA allows you to declare variables and such within it, like any other program, and it was really quite easy to set up. Alongside this, I created some proper subroutines known as initialize bird, update bird, and draw bird, which is usually...
We're starting to look like an actual game program now. Although very low level, way lower level than what I would normally want to write. This is looking like making a video game.
What you do in most game engines as well. Also, I had to implement a timer in order for the game to function properly, and this was a bit trickier than I expected. I basically had to research how it worked and learn there's a different timer for...
We got a kernel 32, and yeah, this is looking very ugly. But the creators of Excel probably never intended for you to make a video game inside of it. It's pretty similar, honestly, to making games on a TI calculator, except for in this case, you have a calculator that wasn't meant to run on AA batteries.
For 32-bit Windows and 64-bit. Research how it worked and learn there's a different timer for 32-bit Windows and 64-bit. And on top of that, I actually had to mess around with how the timer actually functioned, since there really wasn't that much documentation out there. So, after a lot of tinkering and playing around, here's what the build looked like. we now had a bouncing yellow cube.
Let's go.
Next up, I decided to work on getting input to work, which was surprisingly really easy. Firstly, I had to create a subroutine for setting and resetting keys like this. This allows Excel to detect if we pressed or let go of a key. Then, I was able to get some basic jump variables and created a simple jump subroutine that is called when you press the up arrow key.
Again, very basic game programming. It looks exactly like the way that you would handle this in something like Unity, which is crazy, since we're still in Excel.
With this, here's what it looks like. The game at this point was slowly coming together, as input was a pretty big step in completing it. The next best thing I worked on for this to look more like an actual game were sprites. Now, I feel like sprites would be actually kind of easy here because you can treat each individual cell like you would treat a pixel, and then draw sprites like you would traditionally on an old school game machine. Excel allows you to import images directly into it, but I decided for this game I'd create the graphics within Excel itself, and this was a pretty massive pain to do. Firstly, I made a new sheet known as sprites and made each cell a perfect square. Then began the painful process of manually filling in each cell with the right color. For reference,
you know, like literally exactly what I just said.
This clip playing of me making a basic Flappy Bird sprite took about 5 minutes, when in most art programs this could take way less time. I basically navigated to the cell using my arrow keys and filled it in using my mouse. While it did take a while, I actually enjoyed it, oddly enough. With the bird sprite being made, I went ahead and declared a range within Excel to be called SPR_Flappy. And it's cool that Excel lets you do this, as I made a sprite sheet, literally. Then, instead of drawing a yellow cell where the
a sprite sheet. I see what you're doing. I see you out here, sprite sheet, Excel.
player is, I changed it to the range, and boom, we had a Flappy Bird sprite in the game. Next up, while this wasn't really necessary, I wanted to add some character selection, similar to my other Flappy Bird game. So I went ahead and made these sprites for a character selection, similar to my other.
Now, is he gonna put Germa in there though? That's the real question. Does Germa make it into the game?
Flappy Bird game. So I went ahead and made these sprites for a bunch of characters, including some fan favorites. Then, to determine which character you select, I made a global variable and had it change depending on which button you selected on the game's menu sheet. This was quite time consuming, but really easy to implement.
Nice.
Anyways, next up I had to create the actual game window, as in right now the game was just being the game's menu sheet. This was quite time consuming, but really easy to implement.
I feel like that's half of game development, if we're being honest. For half of these things, it takes you about 10 minutes to figure out how you would actually do it, and then 8 hours to put it into practice.
Anyways, next up I had to create the actual game window, as in right now the game was just being tossed on a random sheet. The way I did this was by declaring some variables like the game's width and height. Then the game would draw a border taking these variables into account. When starting the game now, we had this simple border surrounding the screen. You can see here as well, I also made a way to resize every single cell into a pixel.
It's like
Next,
a real
we needed
pixel
to draw
now.
the
Let's
actual
go.
screen. So I picked out some colors to use and did that exact method again to draw a background and floor. After this, I condensed the player's code into a class which would allow us to instantiate it anywhere we felt like, and made it do so in our new game window. The game was finally starting to look more and more like a proper game. However, we were missing probably the next largest aspect of Flappy Bird being the pipes.
Yep.
Firstly, I went ahead and made a pipe sprite, which at this point was just a really long green bar with a gap in the middle. Then, to code the pipes being at a random height, I set up some basic variables like the gap size and max and minimum height. I also made it so it would not drop past the floor and ceiling. And here's what all of that looks like. Every time the game would start, the pipe would appear at a different height. All of that looks like.
I mean, that's looking pretty close to Flappy Bird already.
Every time the game would start, the pipe would appear at a different height. Next, I wanted the pipes to not look like a giant green log, but actual pipes. So, I took a bit of time to manually recreate the new Super Mario...
My man. This is some nice shading, actually. This is some nice sprite work. He put some real effort into the Excel version of Flappy Bird. I feel like this might be more work than the original creator put into making original Flappy Bird.
There's pipe sprite in Excel, and while this took forever, this was 100% worth it, as it looked so much better than before. Now, I had to get the pipes to actually move, which was a lot simpler than I thought. I basically made it so that if the pipe...
Yeah, I mean, just like with time, just slide over time in the same way that you would with the bird. Because wouldn't you... Basically, this is just a matter of moving the screen at a static speed with time.
Pipe's next column was not the farthest left cell, then it would move over. Otherwise, it would set its location back over the right side at a random height. As you can see here, this works just fine. And you can also see a limitation of Excel, being that the game is very choppy. Can't do too much about this as far as I know, but I was perfectly content with this.
I doubt that an Excel spreadsheet has very good draw times, and it's not really made for customizing that sort of thing like a real engine.
Next up, I wanted to work on game states. By this I mean having a proper title screen, and game over screen. Before doing this, I quickly made a grass block sprite and applied it to the floor to make the game look a lot nicer. Then I went ahead and programmed in a play again state that when prompted, you will be able to press either Y or N. Y would restart the game, and N would take you back to the main menu.
Nice.
For this, I wanted a visually appealing sprite for it, which I'm kind of kicking myself because this sprite took like another 20 minutes to make because it's freaking massive. But again, this was well worth it because the game looked really polished for an Excel.
When I saw that, I instantly just thought Rivals of Aether. I feel like that's the exact font that he hit here. But all of these little minor things really are like tricking my brain into just seeing this as a video game rather than as a weird Excel project. So I'm really glad that he took the time to do the minor details because this just looks like a video game now.
After all of this, I had to spice up the menu because at the moment it just looked like garbage. And so, after what was probably like another hour of reconstruction and sprite art, this is what the game's menu looked like, and I
mean, it's true. I feel like UI takes obscenely long compared to what it should in a game. But once again, this is another thing that completely tricks me away from thinking that this is Excel. If it weren't for like all these letters up at the top, you wouldn't even know, and like the bars.
I was really happy with it. You could select a skin on the right and start the game over on the left. And with this menu being completed, I decided to call it here. I was really happy with how this turned out, as I somehow made a visually appealing game within Excel, with physics, character selection, collision, game states, and more. It was something that, despite being extremely primitive and somewhat stressful, I still had a ton of fun with. During the creation of this game, Excel crashed hundreds of times because it became too...
Once again, this is why VBA is trash. I am shocked that we are still using VBA in 2023 because the amount of times I've done minor things with it and Excel just crashes blows my mind. I can't imagine how long he had to just sit around waiting for Excel doing this.
During the creation of this game, Excel crashed hundreds of times because it became too unstable and I was really close to just quitting, but I'm really glad that I actually finished it. And I can't actually recommend Excel as a proper game engine, but if you have any interest with working with extremely stupid or limited programs, I'd say give it a shot. If you want to play this game for yourselves, I'll leave a link to an itch.io page with the sheet available to download.
We definitely
Fair warning, you'll have to unblock the sheet on your PC in order for it to run properly as it uses macros, but don't worry, it's not a virus or anything like that. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you left a like and subscribed if you haven't. And if you have any other ideas for games or challenges like this, leave a comment down below.
Yeah, we definitely got to check this out. Now, humble viewer at home, I'm going to open up this sheet and use the macros. It could put a virus on your computer, but I'm going to take the risk because I'm a real one. What are you doing? Yeah, we'll do that. Let us pick blue guy and start. It's working, kinda. Like, it's clear to me that this is not a problem with the game, but VBA and Excel are losing it right now. Oh, it's so laggy. It's still really cool, though, because it's just running in my own Excel. I know that there's no cheating here. Like, if he will respond. But we got the permanent spinny because, shout out to VBA. Huh? Can we get the 3? Boom. All right. Shout out to Jet Li. That was pretty cool, honestly. I feel like it's hard enough to make a game in like a real engine, much less to try to make something in Excel. I'm going to link his video in the description, and you're also probably going to see a link up here somewhere. We also do game development videos. Do not expect us to make anything in Excel, though, because I'm not going to do that. Anyway, thank you if you stuck around this long. You can check out our channel where we make other videos like this, and where we make our own game development videos, like I said. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys later.